The Greyhound bus wheezed to a stop beside the weathered gas station on Highway 43, its engine ticking in the Alabama heat. Anna Carter shouldered her worn leather bag and stepped onto the cracked asphalt, breathing in the familiar scent of magnolia and motor oil. 5 years. It felt like a lifetime. Mobile hadn't changed much. The same drooping oak trees lined the streets, their Spanish moss swaying in the humid breeze. The same half-broken sidewalks led toward downtown, where the old antebellum mansion still stood guard over the past. But Anna had changed. Everything about her had changed. She walked the familiar route to her childhood home, her boots clicking against the pavement with military precision. The two-story colonial house appeared around the bend, its white columns now slightly grayed with age, the wraparound porch sagging just a little more than she remembered. The garden her mother had once tended with obsessive care now showed signs of neglect, weeds creeping through the flower beds, paint peeling from the shutters. Before she could knock, the front door opened. Sandra Carter stood in the doorway, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, her face bearing new lines that spoke of worry and time. She looked at Anna for 3 long seconds, taking in her daughter's straight posture, the confident set of her shoulders, the way she held herself like someone accustomed to command. "Your father's in his workshop," Sandra said finally, stepping aside. "Brandon's coming for dinner. I made your favorite beef stew." No embrace, no questions about the flight or the journey, just the same careful distance that had characterized their relationship since Anna's decision 5 years ago. Anna stepped inside, noting how the living room had become even more of a shrine to Brandon. New photos lined the mantel, Brandon in his graduation cap, Brandon receiving some corporate award, Brandon shaking hands with Lorna Whitaker, CEO of Falcon Tech. The brass nameplate beneath the latest photo read Brandon Carter, Technical Director, Aegis X Initiative. Anna's old room was exactly as she'd left it, the single bed with its faded quilt, the bookshelf lined with dusty novels, the desk where she'd once struggled through calculus homework. She unpacked methodically, hanging her civilian clothes in the closet. At the bottom of her bag, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was her dress uniform. She laid it out on the bed, running her fingers over the crisp fabric, the colonel's eagles gleaming on the shoulders. Not yet. Tonight, she was just Anna, the daughter who'd made an unconventional choice. Tomorrow, she would be Colonel Anna Carter, DoD Oversight Officer for the Aegis X project. Tomorrow, everything would change. The dining room table groaned under the weight of Sandra's cooking beef stew, cornbread, green beans seasoned with bacon, sweet tea in mason jars. It was a feast worthy of a prodigal son's return, though Anna suspected it had more to do with Brandon's presence than her own. Brandon arrived 20 minutes late, breezing in with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. At 26, he'd inherited their father's height and their mother's sharp intellect, packaging both in an easy charm that had opened doors throughout his life. He wore a crisp button-down with the Falcon Tech logo embroidered above the pocket, his sandy hair perfectly styled, his smile practiced. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing their mother's cheek. "Last-minute call with the Pentagon liaisons. You know how it is." He nodded at Anna, his greeting polite but distant. "Good to see you, sis. How's the military treating you?" "Can't complain," Anna replied, accepting his brief hug. "Congratulations on the promotion. Technical director sounds impressive." Richard Carter emerged from his workshop, wiping oil from his hands with a stained rag. He'd aged more than Sandra, his hair now completely gray, his frame slightly stooped from years of hunching over engines. He managed a smile for Anna, but his face truly lit up when he saw Brandon. "There's my boy," he said, clapping Brandon on the shoulder. "Tell us about this Aegis project. From what I hear, it's going to revolutionize modern warfare. They settled around the table, and Anna found herself relegated to the role of audience as Brandon held court. He spoke eloquently about artificial intelligence, autonomous weapon systems, and the future of military technology. Their parents hung on every word, asking questions that allowed him to demonstrate his expertise. The Aegis X system represents a complete paradigm shift, Brandon explained, warming to his subject. We're talking about AI that can process battlefield data faster than any human commander, make tactical decisions in real time, and coordinate complex operations across multiple domains. It's going to save countless American lives. And how does the oversight process work? Anna asked casually, cutting her cornbread. With a project this sensitive, I imagine the Pentagon keeps pretty close tabs on development. Brandon paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. Well, yes, we work closely with Department of Defense liaisons, regular reviews, security audits, that sort of thing, standard procedure for classified projects. What about penetration testing red team exercises? Of course. We've run extensive simulations. Anna nodded, filing away his responses. She'd reviewed the project documentation. What Brandon considered extensive fell short of DoD standards by a considerable margin. But tonight wasn't about work. Tonight was about family, however complicated that might be. Anna's always been interested in that computer stuff, Sandra said dismissively. Remember how she used to mess around with that old laptop? Never could figure out what she was doing. I was learning to code, Anna said quietly. Seemed useful. Still, imagine if you'd finished your MBA, Brandon said, his tone carefully neutral. You might be working on projects like this instead of… He gestured vaguely. Instead of what? Logistics, supply chain management. Whatever it is you do now. Anna set down her fork, meeting his gaze steadily. And what exactly do you think I do? Brandon, he shrugged. Military bureaucracy. Right? Pushing papers, managing inventories. Important work, of course, but not as important as building the future of warfare. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? The table fell silent. Richard cleared his throat. Well, regardless, we're proud of both our children. Anna's serving her country. Brandon's innovating for national defense. Different paths to the same goal. Anna smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Absolutely. Different paths. Later that night, Anna stood in her childhood bedroom, staring out the window at the backyard where she and Brandon had once played soldier, taking turns being the general. Funny how life had a way of coming full circle. She thought about the phone call that had changed everything 5 years ago. She'd been in her second year of the MBA program at Alabama, struggling through corporate finance and strategic management, feeling like she was suffocating under the weight of everyone's expectations. When the military recruiter had approached her at the career fair, she'd laughed. I'm not soldier material, she'd said. What makes you think that? The recruiter had asked. Anna couldn't answer. She'd always been good at math, excellent at problem solving, naturally analytical. But she'd also been raised to believe that success looked like a corner office and a six-figure salary, not combat boots and military discipline. The decision to enlist had devastated her parents. Sandra had cried for days. Richard had stopped speaking to her entirely for 6 months. Brandon had been the worst, treating her choice like a personal betrayal, as if she'd abandoned ship just to watch him succeed alone. The early years had been brutal. Basic training had pushed her to physical and mental limits she didn't know she possessed. Officer candidate school had been worse, a crucible that burned away everything she thought she knew about herself and forged something harder in its place. Then came her first assignment to the Cyber Command, where her combination of technical skills and strategic thinking finally found fertile ground. She excelled at network security, threat assessment, digital warfare. Within 2 years, she'd been promoted to captain. Within 4, major. And 6 months ago, colonel, making her one of the youngest officers to achieve that rank in her field. The irony wasn't lost on her. While Brandon had been climbing the corporate ladder at Falcon Tech, Anna had been climbing her own ladder in military cybersecurity. When the Pentagon had needed an oversight officer for the Aegis X project, someone with deep technical knowledge and the security clearance to access classified systems, her name had topped the list. She'd requested the assignment not out of spite, but out of professional curiosity. The project represented cutting-edge AI development, and she wanted to understand how civilian contractors were approaching problems she dealt with daily in military contexts. That Brandon was the technical director had been a coincidence, an uncomfortable one, but a coincidence nonetheless. Now, standing in her childhood room, Anna wondered if she'd made a mistake. Family dynamics were complicated enough without adding professional hierarchies to the mix. Tomorrow's evaluation could damage more than just Brandon's career. It could shatter what remained of their relationship entirely. But her duty was clear. The Aegis X system would be deployed to protect American soldiers. If there were flaws in the design, vulnerabilities in the code, or gaps in the security protocols, she needed to find them, even if it meant disappointing her family all over again. Falcon Tech's headquarters rose from Birmingham's Innovation District like a glass and steel monument to technological ambition. The building's sleek lines and reflective surfaces spoke of success, innovation, and unlimited possibilities. Anna approached the entrance in her dress uniform, the colonel's eagles catching the morning light, her bearing radiating the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to command. The lobby buzzed with controlled energy. Engineers in casual clothes hurried past carrying laptops and coffee, their conversations peppered with technical jargon. Security was tight badge scanners, metal detectors, armed guards who nodded respectfully at Anna's uniform and credentials. Colonel Carter, the receptionist said, her voice professionally warm. Mr. Whitaker is expecting you. Conference room 3, third floor. The elevator ride felt interminable. Anna reviewed her notes one final time, though she'd memorized every detail of the project documentation: autonomous AI systems, threat assessment algorithms, real-time tactical decision-making. On paper, it was impressive. In practice, she'd identified several potential vulnerabilities that needed addressing. Conference room 3 was standing room only. Brandon stood at the front, immaculate in a navy suit, his presentation slides projected on the wall behind him. Eisgegon. The audience included Falcon Tech executives, Pentagon liaisons, defense contractors, and military observers. At the head table sat Lorna Whitaker, herself silver-haired, sharp-eyed, radiating the kind of authority that came from building a billion-dollar company from scratch. Anna slipped into the room during Brandon's explanation of the system's neural network architecture. For a moment, no one noticed her. Then a military aide spotted her uniform and rank, nudging his colleague. A whisper ran through the room like ripples on water. Brandon's voice faltered mid-sentence. His eyes found Anna's, widening in shock. For a heartbeat, brother and sister stared at each other across the crowded room, one in a corporate suit, the other in military dress blues, representing two very different kinds of power. Lorna Whitaker rose from her seat, extending her hand. Colonel Carter, welcome to Falcon Tech. Thank you for joining us. Ms. Whitaker, Anna replied, shaking the offered hand firmly. I appreciate the opportunity to review this important project. Please, take a seat. Whitaker gestured to a chair at the front table. Mr. Carter was just explaining the system's decision-making protocols. Brandon cleared his throat, struggling to regain his composure. The Aegis X AI utilizes a multi-layered neural network to process incoming data streams. It can analyze thousands of variables simultaneously and generate tactical recommendations in real time. Anna opened her tablet, stylus poised over the screen. What's the latency between data input and decision output? Approximately 50 milliseconds in optimal conditions. And in degraded network environments. Brandon hesitated. We're still optimizing performance under adverse conditions. Have you tested the system's response to coordinated cyber attacks? Specifically, adversarial inputs designed to corrupt the decision-making process. The room fell silent. Brandon glanced at his technical team, then back at Anna. We've run standard penetration tests. Standard tests assume rational attackers following conventional methodologies. Adversarial AI attacks use machine learning to find vulnerabilities in neural networks that human testers might miss. Has the Aegis system been exposed to such attacks? We're confident in our security protocols. Anna made a note on her tablet. Confidence wasn't the same as testing. She'd seen enough classified reports to know that adversarial AI was a growing threat, one that many civilian contractors underestimated. The presentation continued for another hour. Brandon was clearly knowledgeable and articulate, but Anna noticed gaps in his responses to technical questions, areas where he deferred to other team members or provided vague assurances instead of specific data. When the formal presentation ended, Whitaker approached Anna. Joy said, I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss your preliminary findings. Would tomorrow morning work? Of course. I'll need access to the source code and development environments for a thorough evaluation. Naturally, Mr. Carter will coordinate with you on the technical details. Anna nodded, avoiding Brandon's gaze. I look forward to diving deeper into the system architecture. The next morning found Anna in a sterile conference room deep within Falcon Tech's secure development wing. Multiple monitors surrounded her, displaying cascading lines of code, network diagrams, and system logs. Brandon sat across from her, tension radiating from his rigid posture. You could have warned me, he said finally. Anna didn't look up from her screen. About what? About being the DoD oversight officer, about having this kind of authority. Would it have changed your presentation? It would have changed everything. Anna finally met his eyes. Then you weren't being honest with your investors or your Pentagon liaisons. The technical capabilities should be the same, regardless of who's asking the questions. Brandon's jaw tightened. Don't lecture me about honesty. You let me stand up there and what demonstrate your expertise. Answer straightforward technical questions. This isn't about embarrassing you, Brandon. It's about ensuring that a system designed to protect American soldiers actually works as advertised. She turned back to her monitor, where she'd been analyzing the AI's threat detection algorithms. What she'd found was troubling. The neural network showed signs of overfitting. It performed beautifully on training data, but struggled with novel scenarios. Worse, she'd identified potential backdoors in the code, pathways that could be exploited by sophisticated attackers. Tell me about the algorithm X7 module, she said, highlighting a section of code. Brandon leaned forward, studying the screen. That's part of the target identification system. It analyzes visual data from reconnaissance drones to distinguish between friendly and hostile forces. Have you tested it against deepfake technology AI-generated images designed to fool recognition systems? We've run standard image verification protocols. That's not what I asked. Brandon was quiet for a long moment. No, we haven't specifically tested against deepfake attacks. Anna pulled up another section of code. What about this authentication pathway? It looks like there's a master override function. That's for emergency situations. If the AI makes an obviously incorrect decision, human operators can override the system. And who has access to this override? Military commanders with appropriate clearance levels. How is identity verified? Brandon's silence stretched too long. Anna turned to face him fully. Brandon, how is identity verified for the override function? Biometric scanning? Fingerprints and retinal scans? Both of which can be spoofed with sufficient resources. Anna shook her head. You've essentially built a master key that could allow enemy agents to take control of the entire system. That's not we never intended. Intention doesn't matter. What matters is capability. An adversary who compromises the override system could turn American AI weapons against American soldiers. The color drained from Brandon's face. How certain are you about this vulnerability? Anna was already typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she crafted a simple proof of concept attack. Within minutes, she demonstrated how spoofed biometric data could trigger the override function, granting complete control over the AI's decision-making process. Very certain, she said quietly. The security vulnerability meeting convened at 2 p.m. in Falcon Tech's executive conference room. Present were Lorna Whitaker, the technical leadership team, Pentagon liaisons, and Anna. The atmosphere was tense, heavy with the weight of potential failure. Anna had spent the morning documenting her findings, building an irrefutable case that the Aegis X system, in its current form, represented a significant security risk. The threat wasn't theoretical, she'd successfully exploited the vulnerabilities herself, demonstrating exactly how an adversary could compromise the system. Ladies and gentlemen, Whitaker began, her voice carefully controlled. Colonel Carter has identified some concerns with our security protocols. I've asked her to brief us on her findings. Anna stood, connecting her tablet to the room's projection system. Charts and code samples filled the wall-mounted screen. The Aegis X system contains multiple critical vulnerabilities that could be exploited by sophisticated adversaries. Most concerning is the override authentication mechanism, which relies on biometric data that can be spoofed using current technology. She walked through her findings methodically, demonstrating each vulnerability with clinical precision. The room grew quieter with each revelation. Pentagon liaisons exchanged worried glances. Falcon Tech executives looked increasingly uncomfortable. The implications are severe, Anna continued. An adversary who exploits these vulnerabilities could potentially turn American AI systems against American forces, or use them to target civilian populations while maintaining plausible deniability. Brandon, who had remained silent throughout the presentation, finally spoke. These are theoretical attacks. In practical deployment scenarios, multiple security layers would prevent. I successfully exploited every one of these vulnerabilities yesterday. Anna interrupted. With publicly available tools and moderate technical skill, this isn't theoretical. It's demonstrable fact. Whitaker leaned forward. What's your recommendation, Colonel? Anna had wrestled with this question all night. The easy answer was to halt the project immediately, send everyone back to the drawing board, and rebuild from scratch. That would be the safest course of action from a national security perspective. It would also destroy Brandon's career and potentially bankrupt the company that employed hundreds of people. More importantly, it would set back legitimate AI defense research by years, leaving American forces at a disadvantage against adversaries who weren't bound by safety concerns. I'm recommending a 72-hour development halt, Anna said finally. During that time, Mr. Carter and his team need to patch the identified vulnerabilities and submit to comprehensive penetration testing by DoD Red Teams. If the system passes those tests, the project can proceed under enhanced oversight protocols. The room erupted in murmurs. 72 hours was an impossibly short timeline for the kind of security overhaul Anna was demanding, but it was better than a complete project cancellation. Whitaker looked at Brandon. Is this timeline feasible? Brandon's face was pale but determined. We'll make it work. Then we have 72 hours to save this project, Whitaker declared. All other work stops. Every available engineer reports to Mr. Carter. Whatever resources you need, you'll have them. As the meeting dispersed, Brandon approached Anna. Can I speak with you privately? They found themselves alone in a small office overlooking the Innovation District. Brandon closed the door and turned to face his sister. I need to know, he said quietly. Did you request this assignment because of me? Anna considered lying, offering a comforting fiction that would ease his wounded pride. Instead, she chose honesty. I requested it because I'm good at this kind of work. Because the Pentagon needed someone with my specific skill set. The fact that you're involved is coincidental, but not unwelcome. I'm not here to sabotage you. Brandon, I'm here to ensure that American soldiers don't die because of preventable security flaws. Brandon slumped into a chair. I knew about some of the vulnerabilities, not all of them, but I knew the system wasn't ready for deployment. I thought we could fix them after initial rollout, patch them in the field. That's not how military systems work. There are no second chances when lives are on the line. I know that now. He looked up at her, and for a moment, she saw the little brother who used to follow her around, eager for approval. Will you help us unofficially? I know you can't compromise your position, but Anna was quiet for a long time. I can't provide direct assistance, but I can make sure the penetration testing focuses on the most critical vulnerabilities first. That might give you some guidance on priority. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. 72 hours isn't much time. If you can't fix these problems, I'll have to recommend halting the project indefinitely. Brandon nodded. I understand. And Anna, I'm sorry for everything. I never realized what you'd accomplished, what you'd become. I should have. Anna felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. We all make assumptions about the people we think we know. Falcon Tech transformed overnight into something resembling a military operation. Engineers worked in shifts around the clock, fueled by coffee and determination. The executive conference room became a war room, filled with whiteboards covered in diagrams, timelines, and progress tracking charts. Anna watched from a distance, maintaining her professional objectivity while feeling a growing admiration for the dedication Brandon's team displayed. They brought in security consultants from 3 different firms, including specialists in adversarial AI and biometric spoofing. Every line of problematic code was scrutinized, rewritten, and tested. At home, the Carter family dinner table had become an informal command center. Sandra brought meals to the office for Brandon's team. Richard, despite his limited understanding of software engineering, offered moral support and practical wisdom from his years managing complex mechanical projects. How's he holding up? Anna asked her mother during one of these impromptu meal deliveries. Sandra studied Anna's face carefully. He's exhausted but determined. This is the most focused I've ever seen him. It's like he finally understands what's at stake. And you, how are you holding up? I'm proud, Sandra said simply, of both my children. I always thought success meant safety, stability. I never understood that sometimes the most important work is also the most difficult. On the second day, Anna received an encrypted message from her Pentagon contact, General Ross. Heard you've stirred up quite a hornet's nest down there. How confident are you in the timeline? Anna stared at the message for a long time before responding. 60%. They're good engineers working with genuine urgency, but the vulnerabilities run deep. And if they fail, then we halt the project and start over. No compromises on security. Understood. For what it's worth, the preliminary reports on your evaluation have impressed people here. There's talk of offering you a position on the Joint AI Oversight Committee. Anna filed that information away for later consideration. Right now, her focus was on the next 18 hours. The penetration testing began at 6 a.m. on the third day. Anna led a team of Red Hat hackers and military cyber warfare specialists in a comprehensive assault on the revised Aegis X system. They attacked from every conceivable angle: network intrusion, social engineering, hardware compromise, adversarial AI inputs, and sophisticated spoofing attempts. Brandon and his team watched from the observation room, their faces tense with exhaustion and anxiety. 3 days of nonstop work had transformed the system's architecture, replacing vulnerable components with hardened alternatives and implementing multiple layers of authentication and verification. The first round of attacks failed. The neural network correctly identified and rejected adversarial inputs. The authentication system resisted spoofing attempts. Network intrusion efforts were detected and neutralized by automated defense systems. But Anna's team was just getting started. They escalated to more sophisticated attacks, combining multiple vectors and using cutting-edge techniques that push the boundaries of current cyber warfare capabilities. At 2 p.m., they achieved their first breakthrough, a buffer overflow exploit that created a temporary backdoor into the system's diagnostic functions. Brandon's team scrambled to understand the attack vector while simultaneously developing countermeasures. It's a timing attack, Brandon explained to Anna during a brief consultation break. They're exploiting microsecond-level delays in our encryption routines to extract information about the underlying algorithms. Can you patch it? We think so, but it'll require rebuilding the entire cryptographic stack. Anna checked her watch. 4 hours remaining. Then you better get started. The final hours blurred together. Code patches were written, tested, and deployed at breakneck speed. Anna's team continued their assault, probing for new weaknesses even as old ones were sealed. The observation room filled with tension thick enough to cut. At 5:47 p.m., with 13 minutes remaining in the 72-hour window, Anna called for a final comprehensive test. Her team unleashed every attack they'd developed over the past 3 days, simultaneously, a coordinated assault that would stress test every component of the revised system. The room fell silent except for the hum of computers and the clicking of keyboards. Data streamed across multiple monitors as the Aegis X system fought for its survival against a virtual army of attackers. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The system held. At exactly 6 p.m., Anna powered down her attack systems and turned to face the observation room. Brandon stood pressed against the glass, his face a mask of exhaustion and desperate hope. The system has successfully resisted all penetration attempts, Anna announced. I'm recommending approval for limited deployment under enhanced oversight protocols. The observation room erupted in cheers. Engineers hugged each other. Executives smiled for the first time in days. Brandon slumped into a chair, overwhelmed by relief and exhaustion. But Anna wasn't finished. However, she continued, raising her voice above the celebration, this approval comes with strict conditions: monthly security reviews, mandatory upgrades when new vulnerabilities are discovered, and if the system ever fails a penetration test, Deployment halts immediately until issues are resolved. Lorna Whitaker nodded. Understood and agreed. Thank you, Colonel Carter. Your thoroughness has made this a better, safer system. That evening, the Carter family gathered around their dining room table for the first relaxed meal they'd shared in weeks. Sandra had outdone herself fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread, and peach cobbler for dessert. But the food was secondary to the conversation. I owe you an apology, Richard said, looking directly at Anna. For years, I thought your decision to leave school was a mistake. I was wrong. What you've accomplished, what you've become, I'm prouder than I know how to express. Anna felt tears prick at her eyes. I never needed you to be proud of my choices. Dad, I just needed you to respect them. I do. I respect them and I respect you. Brandon raised his glass of sweet tea. To my sister, who saved my career and probably my life. I always thought I was the smart one in the family. Turns out I was just the arrogant one. You're plenty smart, Anna said. You just needed to learn the difference between intelligence and wisdom. What's the difference? Intelligence is knowing how to build something. Wisdom is knowing whether you should. Sandra wiped her eyes with her napkin. I spent so many years worrying about you. Anna, worried that military life would harden you, change you into someone I didn't recognize. But you're still my daughter. You're just stronger than I ever imagined. The military didn't change who I am, Anna replied. It revealed who I was capable of becoming. They talked late into the evening, sharing stories that had been bottled up for years. Brandon described the pressure he'd felt to be the golden child, the weight of everyone's expectations. Anna talked about the loneliness of the early military years, the struggle to prove herself in a male-dominated field. Why didn't you tell us about your promotions? Sandra asked. We would have celebrated with you. I wanted to earn my place on my own merits, not as someone's daughter or sister. Every time I visited, you all seemed so proud of Brandon's achievements that I didn't want to compete for attention. We never meant to make you feel like you were competing. I know that now, but at the time, it felt like there was only room for one successful Carter child. Richard shook his head. There was always room. We just didn't know how to show it. As the evening wound down, Brandon walked Anna to her car. What happens now? He asked. Now you go back to work. You deploy the system, you save lives, and you remember that good engineering isn't just about what's possible, it's about what's responsible. And you, Anna smiled. I've got a job offer in Washington, Joint AI Oversight Committee. Chance to shape policy for the next generation of military AI systems. Are you going to take it? I think so. It's important work. Brandon hugged her tightly. I'm glad you came home, Anna, even if it was to put me through hell. Especially because of that, she replied with a grin. What are big sisters for? The Pentagon's corridors hummed with controlled urgency, a maze of marble and fluorescent lighting where the nation's defense decisions were made daily. Anna's new office was small but functional, with a view of the Potomac River and walls lined with commendations and security clearances that testified to her growing influence in military AI policy. The Joint AI Oversight Committee had proven to be everything she'd hoped for, and more. Working with cutting-edge technology while ensuring its responsible deployment satisfied both her technical curiosity and her moral compass, she'd helped establish new security protocols for AI weapons systems, testified before Congress on the ethics of autonomous warfare, and consulted on projects that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in military technology. Her work wasn't without controversy. She'd recommended halting 3 separate AI projects due to security concerns, earning her the nickname the AI Assassin among some defense contractors. But she'd also fast-tracked approval for systems that met her rigorous standards, helping deploy technology that had already saved American lives in overseas operations. The Aegis X system had exceeded all expectations in its limited deployment. Brandon's team had continued to refine and improve the technology, staying ahead of evolving threats while maintaining the security standards Anna had demanded. The system had successfully coordinated defensive operations in two separate conflict zones, proving its value while operating within strict ethical guidelines. Brandon visited Washington regularly now, consulting with Anna's committee on new developments and threat assessments. Their relationship had evolved from sibling rivalry to professional collaboration. He'd grown into his role as a technical leader, tempering his ambition with the wisdom that came from having made and learned from serious mistakes. The auditorium at West Point was filled to capacity, cadets in dress gray filling row after row of seats. Anna stood at the podium, looking out at faces that reminded her of her younger self, eager, determined, uncertain about the future, but committed to serving something greater than themselves. 10 years ago, she began, I was sitting where you are now. Not literally, I never attended West Point, but figuratively, I was young, uncertain about my path, and convinced that success meant following someone else's definition of achievement. In the audience, she spotted familiar faces. Sandra and Richard sat in the front row, their pride evident. Brandon was there too, having flown in from Birmingham specifically for this speech. Even Olivia had made the trip from Atlanta, her cousin's support unwavering after all these years. I want to talk to you today about courage, Anna continued. Not the courage to charge into battle, though many of you will display that kind of courage in your careers. I want to talk about the courage to define success for yourself, the courage to choose the harder path when it's also the right path, the courage to stand alone when necessary, but also the wisdom to accept help when it's offered. She shared her story, the decision to leave business school, the early struggles in the military, the family tensions and personal doubts. But she also talked about the satisfaction of meaningful work, the pride that came from protecting others, and the unexpected ways that following your convictions could lead to recognition you never sought. Some of you will become generals, she said as the speech neared its conclusion. Some will become engineers, diplomats, teachers. Your titles matter less than your integrity. Your rank matters less than your character. And your achievements matter less than the lives you touch along the way. The applause was thunderous, but Anna barely heard it. She was thinking about the cadet who had approached her after a similar speech 6 months earlier, a young woman who had been considering leaving the academy because she felt she didn't fit the traditional military mold. You told me that success isn't about proving something, the cadet had said. It's about becoming something. That changed my life. After the ceremony, Anna joined her family for dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. The conversation was easy now, free from the tension and misunderstandings that had once characterized their interactions. I've been thinking about retiring, Richard said over dessert. 35 years in the same shop is enough. Sandra wants to travel. Where would you go first? Anna asked. Washington, Sandra replied with a smile. To visit our daughter, the Colonel. Anna laughed. I'd like that, though fair warning, my apartment is pretty small. We'll make do, Richard said. Besides, I want to see this famous office of yours. Meet some of the people you work with. Speaking of work, Brandon interjected, I have news. Lorna's offered me the CTO position at Falcon Tech. I'd be overseeing all AI development projects, not just Aegis. That's incredible. Brandon, congratulations. I wouldn't have gotten here without you, he said seriously. The security review you put us through, it didn't just improve the Aegis system. It changed how I think about responsibility and technology development. Every project I oversee now goes through the same rigorous testing you demanded. Anna raised her glass. To responsible innovation. To family, Sandra added, her voice thick with emotion. To understanding that success comes in many forms. They clinked glasses as the sun set over the Hudson, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Anna felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her, not the satisfaction of proving a point or achieving recognition, but the quiet peace that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged. Later that evening, as they walked along the riverbank, Brandon fell into step beside Anna. "I have something else to tell you," he said. "I've been talking to some colleagues about starting a nonprofit foundation. We want to provide scholarships for women pursuing STEM degrees in military academies." Anna stopped walking. That's, that's wonderful. Brandon, we want to call it the Anna Carter Foundation for Military Innovation. Absolutely not. Why not? Because it's not about me. It's about the next generation of women who need to know that they can choose their own path, define their own success. She thought for a moment. Call it the Future Leaders Foundation. Make it about possibilities, not personalities. Brandon nodded slowly. "You're right, but I want you to help design the program. Your experience, your perspective, it's exactly what these young women will need." "I'd be honored." They resumed walking, and Anna found herself thinking about the young cadet who had approached her after the speech, bright, determined, but uncertain about her place in the military world. There would be others like her, women who needed to see that strength came in many forms, that leadership could be quiet as well as commanding. "Do you ever regret it?" Brandon asked suddenly. "Leaving the MBA program, following such a different path?" Anna considered the question seriously. "No, the path I took led me to work that matters, to skills I never knew I possessed, to a version of myself I never could have imagined. But more than that, it led me back to family that understands me now in a way they never could before. Even when we were awful to you, especially then, easy support doesn't teach you much about yourself. It was learning to stand alone that gave me the strength to eventually stand with others." They reached Anna's hotel, where she would stay one more night before returning to Washington and the important work waiting there. As they said their goodbyes, Sandra pulled her aside. "I want you to know," her mother said quietly, "that I think about you every day. I worry sometimes, but it's not the same worry I used to have. Before, I worried you were making mistakes. Now I worry that the world isn't ready for what you're capable of accomplishing." Anna hugged her mother tightly. "The world will catch up eventually. It always does." The next morning, Anna boarded her flight back to Washington with a sense of anticipation rather than the weary resignation that had once characterized her returns to work. There was a briefing waiting on emerging AI threats, a consultation request from NATO allies, and a new batch of proposals to review from defense contractors eager to develop the next generation of military technology. But there was also a letter from a young Army lieutenant who had read about Anna's work and wanted advice on pursuing a career in military cybersecurity. There was an invitation to speak at MIT about the intersection of AI and ethics. And there was Brandon's foundation to help plan, ensuring that future generations of women would have the support and encouragement that Anna had learned to provide for herself. As the plane lifted off from New York, Anna looked down at the Hudson River winding through the landscape below. 7 years ago, she had been an uncertain business student, wondering if she was brave enough to forge her own path. Today, she was Colonel Anna Carter, respected leader, trusted advisor, and living proof that the courage to disappoint others could lead to the satisfaction of exceeding your own expectations. The future stretched ahead, full of challenges and opportunities she couldn't yet imagine. But Anna faced it with confidence born from experience, wisdom earned through trial, and the knowledge that she had finally learned the most important lesson of all. You don't need anyone else's permission to become who you're meant to be. Some stories end with vindication, with the satisfaction of proving doubters wrong. Anna's story was different. It ended with something more valuable than vindication. It ended with understanding. Understanding between family members who had learned to see each other clearly. Understanding of her own capabilities and limitations. And understanding that true success wasn't about what others thought of your choices, but about whether you could look back on those choices without regret, as the plane carried her toward Washington and whatever challenges awaited. Anna smiled and opened her laptop. There was work to do, important work that would help protect soldiers like the young woman she had once been. Soldiers who were brave enough to serve their country and smart enough to question how that service could be most effectively utilized. The little girl who had once played soldier in her Alabama backyard had grown up to become a real soldier, one who understood that the greatest victories weren't won on battlefields, but in the quiet moments when you chose principle over popularity, integrity over recognition, and courage over comfort. It had taken her 7 years to find her way home. But once she arrived, she discovered that home wasn't a place, it was a state of mind where you could be both proud of who you'd become and excited about who you were still becoming. And that, Anna reflected as Washington's skyline appeared in the distance, was worth every difficult choice she'd made along the way.